Venus has more volcanoes than any other planet in the solar system, more than 1,600. And a day on Venus, measured by how long it takes to rotate once on its axis, takes longer than the time it takes to complete a full orbit of the Sun. Wow! And that's just Monday. An extreme greenhouse effect warms the planet's surface up to 870 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to melt lead. Winds there reach the speed of 450 miles per hour in the middle cloud layer, faster than the speediest tornadoes on our planet. The pressure on Venus's surface is 90 times higher than that at sea level on Earth. What a great place for a vacation, huh? And recently, this incredible place has become even more intriguing. In the toxic Venusian atmosphere, there's something that might mean the existence of life. Unfortunately, scientists haven't had a chance to collect any microbe specimens or snap any pictures of life there. But they've discovered a chemical called phosphine, and it's a big deal.
If it's not some previously unknown chemistry that produces the gas, then there must be a kind of microbial life involved in the process. Phosphine is made up of 3 atoms of hydrogen and 1 atom of phosphorus. This gas is toxic to any normal life form that needs oxygen, including us humans. On our planet, phosphine can be found in places with no or little oxygen, for example, marshes and swamps. The gas is created by complex mixtures of bacteria living there. It can also be produced industrially.
The weirdest thing is that phosphine isn't supposed to be in Venus's atmosphere at all. This gas needs precise pressure and temperature and tons of hydrogen to form. It wouldn't be all that surprising to find it on Saturn or Jupiter, the famous gas giants, but on Venus? Totally unexpected. There's no way phosphine can be produced naturally on this planet. Tiny amounts of it can be created during volcanic eruptions, lightning storms, minerals blown up to the surface, or meteorites entering Venus's atmosphere. But it's not nearly enough to explain what the astronomers have observed. It would only make 1/10,000th of the phosphine the telescope saw.
But let's start from the very beginning. In 2017, a group of scientists led by Jane Greaves from Cardiff University started to use the James Clerk Maxwell Radio Telescope in Hawaii. That's a mouthful. The main idea was to search for phosphine gas. It would be a sign of life on Venus. When the data came back and the researchers analyzed it, they were shocked. The phosphine signal was powerful. The team checked the results several times. They wanted to make sure no other substance mimicked the presence of phosphine gas.
So now, does it mean there's life on Venus? Well, not necessarily. If this gas is created by some mysterious organisms, it's a big question how they survive on Venus. On our planet, some microbes can thrive in the environments with the acidity of 5%, but no more. On Venus, though, clouds are almost entirely made of acid. And even though they have a rather pleasant temperature of 86 degrees Fahrenheit, these clouds contain more than 90% of sulfuric acid. DNA, amino acids, proteins, life components on Earth would be dissolved there in the blink of an eye. The surface of the planet is too hot for any kind of complex molecules to make up life. The Venusian atmosphere is almost 50 times as dry as the driest place on our home planet. There's a theory that microbes might hide in scarce water droplets floating in the atmosphere, but it hasn't been proved yet.
Right now, the research team's waiting for more telescope time. They're going to look for other gases associated with life. But even if they find more evidence, life forms on Venus will be made up of building blocks absolutely different than those on Earth. Or they might be protected by a sulfuric acid-resistant shell. It can be made of such substances as sulfur, wax, graphite, or something else we can't imagine.
Of course, some experts question the idea of life on Venus. They think the gas might be produced during some geologic or atmospheric processes happening on the planet. But the supporters of both theories agree on one thing: the discovery is extraordinary. Interestingly, astronomers have always tried to find signs of life on giant planets' icy moons, or even closer, on Mars. But they've never seriously considered Venus. If additional telescope observations and future space missions confirm that phosphine is produced by living organisms, we can be in for a bunch of exciting surprises. Then people would know of a planet with an alien biosphere, well, alien to us, and this planet would be just next door to Earth. Now, speaking of visiting Venus, though, would it be possible for people to land on this planet? After all, robots are already tooling around the red planet surface. On the pro side, Venus is closer to Earth than Mars, but it also has much harsher conditions. The planet is hotter than Mercury, even though Venus is almost double the distance from the Sun. The temperatures are higher than the melting point of many metals, and some of them, like lead or bismuth, can fall as snow on the highest mountain peaks. If you set foot on the planet, you'll find nothing but barren rock. Giant basaltic plains are littered with volcanoes and mountains. In some places, the surface melts because of the heat underneath. After it releases some of it, the rock solidifies again. If people ever go to this planet, they will most likely build floating cities in the clouds of Venus's atmosphere. At about 31 miles above the surface, the conditions, like the pressure and gravity, are similar to those on Earth. The temperature is rather manageable too, at around 167 degrees Fahrenheit. Think Death Valley, California on a really hot day. The atmospheric pressure is half of what we have at sea level on our planet. If you went outside, you'd be fine without a pressure suit. The pressure you'd feel would be the same as at the top of Mount Kilimanjaro. Plus, this colony would be protected from the sun's radiation better than one on Mars. If the atmosphere was the mission's final destination, landing a spacecraft, or rather making it hover in the air, would look very different. The idea is to use an airship in the upper atmosphere for long periods of time. The airship, wrapped in an aeroshell, would enter the planet's atmosphere at a speed of 24,000 feet per second. In the next 7 minutes, its speed would drop to around 1,500 feet per second. After that, a huge parachute would open. It would slow the spacecraft down even more, and then things would get a bit hectic. The aeroshell, not needed anymore, would drop away. The airship would then inflate itself, all the while hurtling through the atmosphere toward the planet's surface. Its speed would be at least 330 feet per second. It would get larger and larger, and its drag and lift would increase. Soon, the parachute wouldn't be needed anymore. The crew would get rid of it, and the airship would fill with air completely. If everything went as planned, it would stop 30 miles above Venus's surface. After that, the airship would travel around the planet. It would be moved by the wind, which can reach a speed of 220 miles per hour at the top of the cloud layer. If you decided to move closer to the surface, though, you'd have to be extremely careful. The wind in the middle layer can get twice faster. The airship could be filled with a breathable mixture of hydrogen and oxygen gases. Such a combination would be less dense than the Venusian atmosphere. It would provide the needed buoyancy, to stay up there. Venus is famous for its super dense clouds. These clouds make the planet shine bright enough to be seen from Earth. Venus reflects more than 75% of the light that comes from the Sun. This reflective cloud layer exists thanks to a haze of sulfuric acid droplets in the atmosphere, and they gather exactly at the height where the airship would float. Luckily, people already have a method to overcome the problem of acidity. A few materials, for example Teflon and some types of plastic, have an amazing acidic resistance. They could protect the outsides of the ship. So, let's say you needed to work on a platform outside. Then you'd be able to do it, wearing only a chemical hazard suit and carrying necessary oxygen supply. Ooh, sounds like fun, huh? Yeah, me neither. Venus most likely used to be covered with oceans, from 30 to 1,000 feet deep. Also, some water was locked in the soil of the planet. On top of that, Venus had stable temperatures of 68 to 122 degrees Fahrenheit, which, you have to admit, was quite pleasant and not that different from the temperatures on Earth nowadays. So, what I'm getting at is that for 3 billion years, right until something irrevocable happened 700 million years ago, Venus could have been habitable. But now it's not. The Moon is the second brightest object in our sky. At the same time, among other astronomical bodies, it's one of the dimmest and least reflective. Our natural satellite only seems bright because it's so close to Earth. For comparison, our planet looks much brighter when you look at it from space. It's because clouds, ice, and snow reflect way more light than most types of rock. Triton, Neptune's moon, has all its surface covered with several layers of ice. If this satellite replaced our current moon, the night sky would get 7 times brighter. Neutron stars are some of the smallest yet most massive objects in space. They're usually about 12 miles in diameter, but are several times heavier than the Sun. Oh, and they also spin about 600 times per second, far faster than your average figure skater. Saturn is the least dense planet in the solar system. It has 1/8 the average Earth's density. And still, because of its large volume, the planet is 95 times more massive than Earth. A transient lunar phenomenon is one of the most enigmatic things happening on the Moon. It's a short-lived light, color, or some other change on the satellite surface. Most commonly, it's random flashes of light. Astronomers have been observing this phenomenon since the 1950s. They've noticed that the flashes occur randomly. Sometimes they can happen several times a week. After that, they disappear for several months. Some of them don't last longer than a couple of minutes, but there have been those that continued for hours. The year was 1969, one day before Apollo 11 landed on the Moon. One of the mission participants noticed that one part of the lunar surface was more illuminated than the surrounding landscape. It looked as if that area had a kind of fluorescence to it. Unfortunately, it's still unclear if this phenomenon was connected with the mysterious lunar flashes. Trash isn't just a problem in Earth's oceans, cities, and forests. There is a thing called space junk, which is any human-made object that's been left in space and now serves no purpose. There's also natural debris from meteoroids and other cosmic objects. There are currently over 500,000 pieces of space debris orbiting the Earth at speeds high enough to cause significant damage if they were to collide with a spacecraft or satellite. NASA does its best to track every single object to ensure that missions outside Earth can reach their destination safely. Our Sun is insanely massive. Want some proof? 99.86% of all the mass in the solar system is the mass of the Sun. In particular, the hydrogen and helium it's made of. The remaining 0.14% is mostly the mass of the solar system's 8 planets. The Sun's temperature is hotter than the surface of a star. The surface temperature reaches 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit, but the upper atmosphere heats up to millions of degrees. If someone could dig a tunnel straight into the center of the planet and out the opposite side, and you were adventurous enough to jump into it, it would take you 42 minutes to fall to the other side. You'd speed up as you fell, reaching maximum speed by the time you reached Earth's core. After the halfway point, you would then fall upwards, getting slower and slower. By the time you reached the opposite surface, your speed would be back to zero. Unless you managed to climb out of the hole, you'd immediately start falling again, back down or up to the other side of the planet. This trip would go on forever, all thanks to the weird effects of gravity. Hey, might be a fun way to spend an afternoon. There might be more metals, for example, titanium or iron, in lunar craters than astronomers used to think. The main problem with this finding? It contradicts the main theory about how the Moon was formed. That theory says that Earth's natural satellite was spun off from our planet after a collision with a massive space object. But then, why does Earth's metal-poor crust have much less iron oxide than the Moon's? It might mean the Moon was formed from the material lying much deeper inside our planet. Or these metals could have appeared when the molten lunar surface was slowly cooling down. Or maybe, as they've been saying for centuries, it's made of green cheese. Earth could have been purple before it turned blue and green. One scientist has a theory that a substance existed in ancient microbes before chlorophyll. That thing that makes plants green evolved on Earth. This substance reflected sunlight in red and violet colors, which combined to make purple. If true, the young Earth may have been teeming with strange purple-colored critters before all the green stuff appeared. The highest mountain in the solar system is Olympus Mons on Mars. It's 3 times as high as Mount Everest, the Earth's highest mountain above sea level. If you were standing on top of Olympus Mons, you wouldn't understand you were standing on a mountain. Its slopes would be hidden by the planet's curvature. Astronomers have found a massive reservoir of water in space, the largest ever detected. Too bad it's also the farthest, 12 billion light-years away from us. The water vapor cloud holds 140 trillion times as much water as all the Earth's oceans combined. What are we supposed to do with that information? Venus spins at its own unhurried pace. A full rotation takes 243 Earth days, and it takes the planet a bit less than 225 Earth days to go all the way around the Sun. It means a day on Venus is longer than a year. There's very little seismic activity going on inside the Moon, yet many moonquakes caused by our planet's gravitational pull sometimes happen several miles below the surface. After that, tiny cracks and fissures appear in the satellite surface, and gases escape through them. Hey, they sometimes escape from me, too. Now, Mars is the last of the inner planets, which are also called terrestrial since they're made up of rocks and metals. The red planet has a core made mostly of iron, nickel, and sulfur. It's between 900 and 1200 miles across. The core doesn't move. That's why Mars lacks a planet-wide magnetic field. The weak magnetic field it has is just 1/100th% of the Earth's. When the planets in the solar system were just starting to form, Earth didn't have a moon for the longest time. It took 100 million years for our natural satellite to appear. There are several theories as to how the moon came into existence, but the prevailing one is the fission theory. Somebody went fishing and caught the moon? Actually, no. The fission theory proposes that the moon was formed when an object collided with Earth, sending particles flying about. Gravity pulled the particles together, and the moon was created. It eventually settled down on the Earth's ecliptic plane, which is the path that the moon orbits. So, looks like the green cheese is off the table now. The largest single living thing on Earth turns out to be a mushroom in Oregon. This enormous honey mushroom lives in Malheur National Forest and covers an area of 3.7 square miles. It could be as much as 8,500 years old. You could be forgiven for missing it, though, since most of it's hidden underground. When the roots of individual honey mushrooms meet, they can fuse together to become a single fungus, which explains how this one got so big. If you could gather all that mushrooming stuff into one big ball, it could weigh as much as 35,000 tons. That's about as heavy as 200 gray whales. Hey, that's a whale of a mushroom. Hehe. The largest asteroid in the solar system is called Vesta, and it's so big that it's sometimes even called a dwarf planet. A trip to the nearest star, apart from the Sun, would take you 5 million years on a commercial airplane. That's what I call a long-haul flight. Space isn't supposed to be black. There are stars everywhere. Shouldn't they light up everything around? Well, you don't see stars wherever you look because some of them haven't existed long enough for their light to reach Earth. A day on Uranus lasts 17 hours, 14 minutes, and 24 seconds. But get this, the planet has a tilt of around 98 degrees, and that makes a season on the gas giant last 21 Earth years. Now, some scientists believe that our planet used to have an additional satellite. According to their research, a small celestial body, about 750 miles wide, orbited Earth like a second moon. It most likely crashed into our main satellite later on. Such a collision could explain why the two sides of the moon look so different from each other, one being heavily cratered and rough. Or it could be the green cheese. No one will hear your cry in space, or something like that. We've all heard this famous chilling phrase, and it's actually true. Space, for the most part, consists of a giant nothingness. There's a lot of, space in space. But this doesn't mean there are no sounds in space. In fact, there are plenty of them, and some of them can even make you shiver. Let's take a look at the scariest space sounds. First of all, how are cosmic sounds even recorded? Sound is just the vibration of molecules. When you scream, you make the molecules push each other furiously until they reach the ear of the person you're yelling at. Then these vibrations get transmitted to the brain, and we recognize them as something that you might need to apologize for. In other words, to hear something, we need molecules. And that's where things get complicated. There aren't any of them in space. The entire universe almost completely consists of a vacuum. No, not a Hoover. Absolute nothingness. However, the wizards from NASA still record space sound somehow. So how do they do it? The thing is, there are some types of waves that don't care about molecules. We regular folk can't perceive them without some special devices. These waves include, for example, radio waves. We'll need a radio or something like that to recognize them. And that's exactly what NASA's satellites do. They catch random radio waves. Thanks to their heroism, we can find out how different cosmic bodies sound. These satellites record a variety of waves, fluctuations of plasmas, magnetic fields, and other, stuff. And then scientists from NASA transform all this into normal soundtracks. And some of them sound quite frightening, to put it mildly. Let's take our magnetic field, for example. It surrounds our planet like an invisible shield, protecting us from all sorts of nasties, like radiation and solar winds. At the same time, we can neither see it, feel it, nor hear. Oops, well, the last one is outdated. Scientists from the Technical University of Denmark took magnetic waves recorded by the ESA swarm satellite. They converted them into an audio track and got a pretty creepy result. Now, to be honest, it sounds more like an eerie entity stalking you in the middle of the night. And if you remember the maps of Earth's magnetic field, it starts to feel like a spider crawling nearby. Ew. And this isn't the first strange sound that we caught on Earth. Recently, we caught another weird radio emission from space. Scientists found out that the repeating signal came from somewhere very far away, like billions of light years away from us. Such fast radio bursts usually lasted no longer than a few milliseconds, but this one was unique. It lasted about 3 seconds, basically thousands of times longer than usual. And at the same time, the signal was very precise, so much so that scientists even compared it to a heartbeat. Scientists believe that this signal is caused by pulsars, or neutron stars. One time, Nikola Tesla caught something similar, but unfortunately, at that time, we didn't know about such things as pulsars, so Tesla was sure that he had caught a message from some extraterrestrial life. It's a pity that the truth turned out to be much more boring. But let's move on from the Earth to the Moon. In 1969, the astronauts of the Apollo 10 mission, the spacecraft that made the final test flight to the Moon, flew past its surface. And then they caught some strange signals coming from the dark side of the Moon, the side that we never see because the Moon is tidally locked to us. The sound was so weird that the astronauts weren't even sure whether to report it to NASA. They were afraid they wouldn't be taken seriously, and maybe even not allowed to participate in the next space missions. Here's what it sounded like. But according to NASA, it's not some creepy extraterrestrial music at all. These may just be some radio waves that affected each other because of their proximity, although the astronauts who heard it for the first time probably felt a little creeped out. Let's move to the other planets. Now, 40 years ago, scientists actively explored the surface of Venus. They sent as many as 10 probes there, which were supposed to capture audio and video shooting from the surface. Now we know what Venus, which could easily destroy us at any attempt to even get close to it, sounds like. Horrifying. And you wouldn't expect anything else from the most dangerous planet in the solar system. Unfortunately, Venus is even more toxic than the average Twitter user. So these probes didn't last too long. They heroically arrived on a planet and soon broke down. Next one is Jupiter. This space giant, which is 11 times larger than the Earth, never fails to scare us. One of NASA's probes, Juno, flies around Jupiter every few weeks. The probe is moving at a tremendous speed, 130,000 miles per hour. One day, Juno caught one of the strongest invisible signals it had ever encountered. This was the point at which the mad solar wind came into conflict with the magnetic field of Jupiter. It kind of sounded like a cosmic boom. The original sound lasted 2 hours, but it was compressed to a few seconds. It actually sounds more like a collision of a sea wave and a rock. But here, in terms of horror, Jupiter surprisingly loses to one of its small moons, Ganymede. In 2021, the Galileo space probe flew past Ganymede, and during its flight, it received a rather strange recording. These sounds are satellite radiation, and it's unclear whether it sounds like a cozy sunny day in the jungle or like thousands of bats waiting for you in the night. Next one is Saturn. This signal was caught by the Cassini-Huygens Automatic Interplanetary Station, which was launched into space in 1997. When flying past Saturn, Cassini recorded a pretty scary sound. This terrifying cry of thousands of souls is actually just some radio waves. They aren't too different from what the auroras emit on Earth. A little later, Cassini received another recording, the sounds made by lightning and thunderstorms on Saturn. They sound pretty interesting too. More like popping corn or a Geiger counter, right? But that's just because these lightning strikes have a crazy frequency. Moving on from the solar system to outer space. The famous Voyager 1 was launched back in 1977 and continues to send us data even 40 years after its launch. In 2012, it left the solar system and entered interstellar space. And then, while abandoning its home, Voyager 1 detected the sound of plasma waves. The original recording lasted 7 months, but fortunately, scientists felt sorry for us and reduced it to 12 seconds. It isn't really eerie, but is still kind of unsettling. And although it feels like nothing can beat Saturn's horrors, let's end this tournament with one of the scariest objects in the universe, a black hole. This sound was recorded by the Chandra Space Telescope. While studying a cluster of galaxies in the constellation Perseus, they discovered something strange. Some undulating movements appear from the center of the cluster. They spread out in all directions, like circles on the water. Scientists have suggested that this was caused by a supermassive black hole. The thing is, black holes don't always devour space objects entirely. Sometimes they kind of spit them out. This causes vibrations of gases, which we can convert into soundtracks. What's interesting is that the oscillation of each such wave actually lasts about 10 million years. You're just listening to a very accelerated recording. Scientists have reduced the delay between oscillations by about 144 quadrillion times. So let's check it out. This is probably the eeriest sound from the whole list. Nothing too loud or wild, but there's something dark and disturbing about it. Now, those were the scariest space sounds captured by NASA. To be fair, most of them sounded creepy simply because they're radio waves, but it's still fun to get spooked sometimes. That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and share it with your friends. Or if you want more, just click on these videos and stay on the bright side.